Hi, my name is Paul Sargent, and welcome to AP European History. Today, we're going to take a look at some lecture notes having to do with Chapter 25 in the Spielvogel text, the beginning of the 20th century crisis. This is really World War I and the Russian Revolution. And today, we're going to take a look at how the war began and how it ended up in a big stalemate. So let's get going. First of all, this is kind of what we think about when we think about World War I, is a lot of trenches, infantrymen in the trenches, a lot of destruction in the background like you see back there. This is the traditional picture, and it pretty much sums up what most of the war was like, especially on the Western Front. But getting to why it started, you need to think back to the alliance system that was covered in the previous chapter here. But certainly we have some big causes, nationalism being a major cause here. All right, there's a competition here between nation states. They're not cooperating like they were during the Congress of Vienna and the Concert of Europe. Now, heading into the 20th century, these countries are becoming increasingly competitive and dropping themselves into systems of alliances that set one against each other. And a lot of this is what's called brinksmanship. This is a term that we're going to use a lot during the 20th century. And it's kind of bringing everything right to the edge and seeing who's going to actually give in first. It's almost like playing chicken on a national or an international level. There's a lot of internal dissent going on. Dissatisfied minorities, especially in places like Austria-Hungary, that have a lot of minorities. Certainly the Irish are having some dissatisfaction in the British Empire. And labor movements are becoming dissatisfied, advocating for socialism, advocating for more change and things like this. Militarism is a huge cause here, because as these countries are starting to see some sort of competition, they're enlisting larger armies. There are more militaristic elements. I don't want to take this to its ultimate extent, but the Boy Scouts is a militaristic organization, which is designed to kind of instill that discipline and that order and seeking glory in young boys. And conscription, which is just the draft, is being introduced places. There's a growing influence in many countries of military leaders who are, thinking outside of the box, thinking about military terms and things of that. And it leads to this lack of flexibility in military plans. Military thinkers are very good at coming up with very good plans. And Germany is a great example of this. The Schlieffen Plan to win a world war was great. It was very well thought out and worked on for many, many years, and incredibly detailed. But if plans aren't flexible, then if something goes wrong, everything falls apart. So here in 1914, you see that the Triple Alliance is allied here in the middle, surrounded by what becomes known as the Triple Entente. And this is a bad situation if you're stuck in the middle, because it means you're going to have to fight on two sides, which you never, ever want to do. Well, the summer of 1914 becomes the big time when the outbreak of war happens. It starts in the Balkans. Another crisis happens in this area that's pushing for independence and all of that. There's a lot of tension that's there, a lot of rivalries between Serbs and Austrians, between the Austrians and Russians, between lots and lots of people. And there's a mutual distrust and hatred for the competing powers of Russia, Austria-Hungary, and Serbia, because each one of those is trying to sort of expand their influence over this area that has just a whole lot of different nationalities living in it. It all comes to a head on June 28, 1914, with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophia in Sarajevo. And it leads to a series of events which ultimately ends up with Germany. Austria gets upset with Serbia. They put a lot of demands on them. Germany gives their pledge of full support to Austria. We'll help you out with whatever, and we'll give you basically a blank check. Go for it. Do what you need to do. We have your back. Because they know that there's going to be a problem with Russia. And it ends with a series of declarations of war. Various countries start to mobilize, especially Russia. Once Russia starts to mobilize, the Germans have to turn back and look at their war plan and say, oh my gosh, we've got to get going, because our war plan starts with Russian mobilization. So they try and get Russia to stop. Russia doesn't stop mobilizing. Boom, here we go. And that involves all of the Western powers. Okay, now your book gives you a quick chronology here, but notice, please, how quickly this happens. Okay, the assassination is followed very quickly by the blank check. The ultimatum to Serbia happens on July 23rd. Austria and Serbia, now again, this is still a localized small war. We can hold it here on July 28th. Russia mobilizes on the 29th. Germany says to stop 2 days later, declares war on Russia the day after that. And by August 4th, all the major powers in this period of 4 days are involved in a war. And this is the Schlieffen Plan, right? In order to win, they have to, they believe, go in and take out France first, because France is going to be, they got to knock them out quickly. And then all of their armies can head over to the east to fight against Russia. But in order to do it, they have to go through Belgium. And Belgium is backed up by Britain. All right, so what happens? Well, at the outbreak of war, there's a lot of excitement. There's a real belief in quick victory. A lot of, we'll be home by Christmas kind of stuff. This will be a quick war, and everybody's excited because, here's a real sort of, here's a cause. In the West, we see the complete failure of the Schlieffen Plan because of the Battle of the Marne. The German advance is stopped. In the East, Russia has a lot of failures on their way to mobilize and on their way to fight. And again, your book's going to go through and list different battles and things, but the AP exam doesn't ask about battles, so I wouldn't even worry about them. Austria has some initial failures. There is some success, especially down in the Balkans. But this is a good example of the excitement of war. Guys are going off, women are all excited, like, oh yeah, hey, this is going to be great. You're going to come back heroes. We love guys in uniform, all of this. And it happens in all of the countries around Europe. This is what the Western Front's going to end up looking like, with this line being the ultimate armistice line. You can see there's some movement here, but lots of trenches. Eventually, you hit this period, 1916, 1917, where there's an area between the trenches called no man's land. It's filled with barbed wire. Nothing lives there. It's a blown out shell of absolutely nothing. And so the question becomes, okay, so we've been sitting here for 2 years in our trenches. How do we break the stalemate? And a lot of this has to do with this strategy. You soften up the enemy with artillery. In other words, you blast them for 1, 2, 3 days, maybe. And then you go over the top. You send mass amounts of people at the enemy across no man's land and try and take the trench. And the men are told that there's going to be nothing but dead bodies in that trench. So just go for it because there's no problem. We've softened them up with this artillery. Well, it doesn't happen. In the Battle of Verdun, 700,000 soldiers lose. I mean, these numbers, it's always tough to teach these numbers because it's impossible for the human mind to get their idea, get itself wrapped around 700,000 people. You've probably never been in a place where you've seen 700,000 people, but it's a lot, right? And it's kind of a symbol of how senseless trench warfare is. From daily life, the sights and sounds are horrific. Dead bodies, decomposing bodies, the smell. When you're getting shelled, these guys are burying themselves underground in holes and sitting there hoping that a shell doesn't kill them, but just waiting with no ability to do anything else. There's a lot of boredom, and then there's periods of terror. And gradually, there becomes on both sides, especially among soldiers, this kind of live and let live kind of idea, why are we killing everybody? The Eastern Front moves a little bit more, but you still kind of see this. The war does widen. I'll get into this in the next series of, or in the next video lecture. We'll talk about the widening of the war, and we'll talk about how it becomes a total war that encompasses not just the soldiers that are in the trenches, but everyone who's involved. All right. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this helped. I'll see you next time. My name's Paul Sargent.